Hi, this is Brandon. LC Wargame on the podcast. I'm Pete Mueller.
Never go full retard, Spence.
How many strokes have you had?
I like to picture my Brandon like a mild autistic child.
That's pretty accurate.
Jeremy, please.
Is everybody actually ready? We don't want to do any racist jokes before this one.
Nope, they're all on
different theme this one.
By the way, I hope no one ever wants to become president because we just ruined our chances.
Are you kidding me? Donald Trump is running. If that motherfucker can
Hillary
run, I can
running.
win.
Let's be honest.
Hillary's winning.
He is more racist than any of us in real life.
Like openly,
so
all the time. I mean, he's less molesty than I am, but I mean, he's definitely more racist.
I don't know about that.
I do, don't. Come on, really? I could beat Donald Trump at rapey.
You'd have to put on like a really weird like trench coat or something.
I have one.
Oh, never mind. Wow, is that why you live alone?
You know I have a calfskin jacket?
No,
I don't really like leather,
that.
But I mean, it makes me excited.
Did you tie the front of it in a knot and wear it across your belly and just like walk around?
Do you have a camera at my apartment?
Did you know I have spurs and a cowboy hat?
You wore them last week, yes.
And the no pants. Again with the no pants.
But yet I wear the belt buckle.
You don't need you don't need pants
but
for spurs.
Without a belt.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
This is just a thing.
All right, I think
Intro.
we've now done our pre-ramble, so we can go.
God, that's a thing?
Hello, and thank you for listening to another episode of Learn to Wargame, the audio podcast. This is Brandon, or PG Mutilus on the forums, and I play Convergence.
This is Jeremy. I go by Lord Fool on the forums, and I play Mercenaries right now.
This is Spence. Just Spence on the forums. I play Menoth. I bought some Scorn, too, but I play Menoth.
And this is Parker Guidry, and I tweak on the forums, and right now I play Crix, but according to our last podcast, I did some soul searching, and I guess I'm a Signar player, I guess. So,
that's
there
true.
you have it.
Yeah.
You're my favorite Signar player aside from Jake.
Wow, that's like the two Signar players in our meta. That's interesting.
I think Cody's going back to Signar.
Oh, third.
No, that is not true.
Isn't that what he said?
No.
Something
about they're terrible. Anyway, so today we're going to rate the factions in not at all an official way. We're just going to basically tell you what we personally think, which is the best thing that you want to hear.
Most truth ever.
So of the 12 factions, we're going to rate them 1 through 12 on what we feel is like the current power rankings or strength amongst the different factions in the current meta. And this is after the errata that took place in August.
And now we're also saying, like, playing the absolute best versions of the factions.
So with all the tools available to said faction, how strong they could possibly be.
Right. So we're not saying if you tally up all the positives and all the negatives.
Right. We're not like Karchev, Strakov, and Zerkov are on this bandwagon as well. It's like you cut the weak and you take the strong and you do your best. Like this is what we're rating.
Okay.
Shut up, Spence.
No, I'm here. Can we just go ahead and wipe minions?
Honestly, I don't know why we wouldn't just immediately rate them 12, but we'll talk about that later.
Hey,
so
they have Watcher.
Minions?
That's true.
Did I miss something? Do they actually have Watcher?
Yes.
On who?
Strum and Drug.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I'm looking at this. I don't believe you.
I believe it's one of Strum's.
Well, doesn't he lose it if he switches his forms, though?
Well, yeah, because it's an upkeep spell.
So, never mind. So they have Watcher sometimes.
Okay, so who's on the top of the list?
Watcher.
I have, for no reason whatsoever, rated them in this order.
Not rated them or written them down?
I've written them down.
Okay, so we're going to
I'm going to read them in the order of this.
That's already wrong.
It is wrong. Well, this is definitely not the ratings. I just wrote them down for them.
Oh, okay.
All right, first faction. We're going to rate this just like we do one of our Colossal episodes where we rate the casters with the Colossal. So if you've ever listened to one of those, you'll be ahead of the curve. So we're going to rate first Khador.
I've been in all of them, and I still don't know what's going on.
So I figure as we talk about each faction, we'll throw out a couple like strong lists that you commonly see in the meta.
8.
It would go in at 6.
Well, it would be 6 or 7 because that'd be the middle point, and then we'd move them from there.
7.
I think the obvious choices for Khador. We have 2 big Khador fans here. I think the obvious choice for Kador are Epic Sorsha is good with a lot of stuff because she one of the most amazing spell lists in the game, amazing feat, just deals with a lot of meta choices.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really strong in general. She also just has some weird things, just like, oh, you have Vengeance? Well, I have this spell that says you don't get Vengeance on your unit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that kind of stuff.
There's a lot of things that Sorsha shuts down.
Right.
And just does well against.
Right. And then you usually pick Sorsha and then your choice of other thing that just murders everything in front of it, like one of the Vlads, one of the Butchers, one of the Irisks, and
they have a lot of force amplification casters.
Right. And force amplification that doesn't require a lot of it's kind of fire and forget. Like I do this one effect and everything becomes ridiculously strong. Also, since they're primarily an infantry faction, they get their force multiplication happens really quickly and really overpoweringly.
And a lot of their casters have multiple buffs or army-wide buffs, so the more infantry they can get, the better.
The one, and also they have some of the biggest threat ranges in the game, bar none.
Well, it's a great faction, but the thing is, like, whenever you start thinking, like, what do I have to build to play against? What am I gonna have to play against it all out there? At no point are you thinking, holy fuck, what if they put fucking Kador down? That's not a thing.
Well, it actually can be. A lot of the problems that you would see when going up against Kador is that if you can solve for their defense, they really crumble. Or if you have a strong control element. So for a lot of the time, their offense output has never been their problem. It's always their ability to survive long enough to do their damage. Because also, a lot of things in their faction are susceptible to easily being killed.
It's really interesting that they're not seen as the glass cannon faction because they have so many deep... Like, you can run an entirely infantry army that's really viable, that has... Not one model has a single wound. So you can, like... They can have deep health and they can have longer living models. So it's not that they're seen as kind of a glass cannon variety like Legion might be, but it is 100% true that one of the funny things is they rely upon the charge. Like, the ability to charge. So many of their key effects need to charge. So as soon as they go up against a faction that has a prevalency of denying charges, they instantly become much worse. But we're going to see that when we start comparing with other factions.
Or they get forced into a gunline perspective.
Right, but most gun lines rely upon things that remove charges because they love having that 3-inch buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're thinking 7 is okay for them right now?
I think we can all agree that 7 is the night. It's either 6 or 7, I say 7.
Because they're not going to be on the upper end of this list.
At least until Epic Karchev comes out.
True. We're going to still limit 7. They might get pushed up or down as other factions get rated if you're not familiar with the system. Listen to our other fucking podcasts. Anyway, moving on.
Dang.
Crits.
That would be 6?
So first we'll talk about the faction a little bit. Obviously Body and Soul is still popular at the moment. Probably less so than it was, but it's still a list. Denny 1, very strong.
I think they have good control, good assassination.
If it needs to break.
Definitely great attrition.
Yeah, the only thing Cricks suffer from is survivability. The general concept of their army is that it can be killed, but almost everything in their army that they can take will trade up if given the option.
Yeah, especially when the new Colossal comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the higher end of this, Crix is going to be up there with the 6.
Is there anything else we want to point out about Crix before?
One of the biggest strengths of Crix is, like, it's kind of like Jeremy said. You're just like, they're really good at assassinations, but they're also really good at attrition, and they're also really good at scenario, and they're also really good at control. Like Crix, even though it's seen as kind of in terms of like theme, they're very polarized with the undead dark army thing. They're actually, in terms of the kinds of armies they can play, it actually has some amazing variety. Their models, it's funny, also ironic, because a lot of their models are not duplicitous in their variety. Like, they don't have very many models that have guns and swords. They don't have that kind of stuff. But depending upon what caster you play, their casters are such a wide variety and they're so strong. They're one of the factions that when you say I'm playing Crix, your opponent goes, oh crap, what 2 casters are you playing? Because that will tell me much more about what you're actually doing. Because Crix can do so many different things.
And I'll say also an interesting is the vast majority of their casters, if not all of them, are entirely viable. Even their bad casters are moderately good.
They have one of the deepest caster benches and one of the deepest infantry benches. Their infantry is incredibly strong, and their casters are incredibly strong. including that their casters are good at buffing their infantry.
A lot of their jacks are incredibly good. You don't want to use them. I mean,
That's
that's
true.
says
Like
something.
their casters and infantry are so good that you don't take their good other things.
So it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. I say that they're going to be on the upper end. It's toward the end. So let's go and put them at the
Right.
same
But even
time.
then, things like, with the exception of the Seether, every single one of their jacks might be undercosted. Like, they're pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then you just take a tier force and they lower them all.
Okay, so I'm going to put them in at 6. I think we can all agree that Trix is stronger in the current meta than Khador.
Yep.
No arguments. 4 out of 4.
This is such a hard episode to do. Just so like, if you listen to
It's
this,
going to get
please,
hard here in a minute.
even though you listen to this episode, please understand that we are not saying you should just play whatever faction we put at
No,
number
right,
one.
Right. We're just
Yeah.
rating
I
what
am.
we think when you should keep
Jeremy
an
is
eye
just
out.
saying that.
And a lot of this might just come from, groupthink. Like, I'm curious how much of the meta is groupthink as opposed to actual effectiveness. Like, maybe Denny 2 was always broken, but because groupthink thought that she wasn't played. But then when Body and Soul got made, then maybe she became groupthink broken, so everyone's like, well, let's play her, and then they just realized that Denny 2 is just broken.
That's actually one of the things I'm going to bring up later when we get to some other factions. Some of these, right now, Khador is not considered... people play a lot of Khador because it's... When you look at the game, when beginning players look at the game, Khador has a lot of appealing qualities to it. And so a lot of people gravitate towards it, so you see it played a lot. Crix is played a lot in the meta because people want to be more competitive, and it is more competitive currently in the meta. But there are some factions we're going to talk about later that I'm going to try to upvote a little bit because I think they have things, just like you're talking about, that people don't know are there, but they are just incredible because groupthink has denied them
I agree.
playability.
I also think Khador and Crix are probably the easiest to define factions for a new player. So you're basically say Khador, they're Soviet.
Well, sure. They have probably the strongest natural aesthetic.
Identity.
They're very defined in what they are. It's like, this is clearly like, we are not the good guys army as the Khador guys,
Right.
but you know where they're coming from. And
Right.
then Crix is like, well, we're clearly just the evil guys. We just want to kill everything.
In Crix, you just describe them as undead pirates.
Sure. They're undead necromancy pirates. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, sweet. This sounds awesome. So,
Yeah, that's cool. I'll get it.
so now let's move on to Signar. I think this is where we're going to start jobbling things around.
The problem we're going to run into is I don't really like Signar too much. Brandon, you don't really like Signar too much.
I don't like Signar's aesthetic.
Jeremy doesn't like
I
Signar
understand
too
what
much.
Signar is
I
about.
like Signar.
Shut up.
I
You don't
You
love
like
love
Magnus.
I like
love-
Magnus, which is Signar.
I
True
love
Signar.
Signar's aesthetic. I love it.
Really?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I can't
So
stand it.
talking about Signar, Haley 2, probably their strongest caster. Very strong control element, very strong scenario play. A lot of what the Signar army is about is the killing infantry because they have lots of high accurate abilities with lower POW. They also have very good target selection, so they get to pick out what they want to kill. They do struggle against heavier armor.
I don't
deep
really
health.
think they do that much. They have enough access to...
But they have to try for it. Like, Crix doesn't have to try to kill armor. Just
No.
naturally building a Crix list will break armor. More
Yep.
so than most Signar lists that try to break armor.
One of the hardest parts about Signar right now is if you're really trying to play them in a 2-list, like, meta game, you must bring Brisbane or maybe Striker 3 if you think you're only going to play against things slower than you, because Brisbane and Striker 3 are the only two things in Signar that can reliably do damage to armor 19 with 8 health. Like, if it has armor 19 and 8 health, you are not killing them with your Signar army. Enjoy not killing them. You're just not killing them. It's not possible.
Okay.
But Brisbane and Striker 3 can do it, but Striker 3 has a lot of limitations, and Brisbane only gets to do it on one turn. So,
Striker 2 can kind of help his army deal damage, but it's much harder to apply his positive charge buff than it is for, like, Striker 3's Fury.
right. Striker 3's Fury and Feet is like you said, much easier to apply, but all of Signar, unlike Khador, there are two Signar. There's Striker 3 Signar army swings just as hard as a Khador army, but Khador will do it 6 inches farther away.
So,
And that's so.
do we want to point out the fact, I think this is true about Signar, large to level. I think Signar is not an army that you can play with a very low skill cap typically. Signar is an army that I think is, I don't want to say high risk, high reward, but like the better you play it, the better you get out of it, obviously. And that's true about a lot of things, but there's a huge swing in
I
Signar.
think Signar is less forgiving than the previous
Yeah.
two factions we've talked about.
Yes.
If you set
And
Signar down and you don't know what you're doing, you're going to flounder about it, you're going to fail and accomplish nothing.
That's one of the reasons when I see new players, I often warn them about Signar, like I warn them about Circle. When you get into horrors, Circle sounds cool because you know what druids are and werewolves are cool. When you see Signar, you're like, cool, storm stuff and advanced technology for steampunk. It's very steampunk faction. It's got all the steampunky goodnesses, like the goggles and the spiky hair and stuff like that. So people get into it for that. But I always tell them, yes, it does have that aesthetic that's really very steampunky, but getting into this faction, you're automatically playing a faction that'll be less forgiving. As soon as a Signar caster spends all their focus, they're going to die. It's so easy to kill them. So easy.
So, okay, Signar in the overall, I want to put them at that 6 point because I know they're going to be underneath Crix. I don't think they're beneath Khador, though.
I would agree. I think they're ahead of Khador, but behind Crix.
So,
funnily enough, Signar versus Crix usually suffers.
Exactly. They're the natural predator of Crix.
The issue you run into, though, is just because you have a silver bullet for whoever's top dog does not make you top dog.
Correct.
This is not the number one headband.
I think that honestly is the reason they're number 5 or just behind Crix is because they have the edge up on them. If Crix naturally beats Signar, I think Signar would be a horrible faction.
I agree.
Like, if for some reason that's just how it worked out, then I think it'd be terrible. With how it works out, I think they just come up behind Crix.
Crix dropped into a random meta. Crix is going to do better than Signar. Crix dropped into a meta with 4 Signar players. The Crix player's going to quit. Because they're just going to struggle against Signar.
Neutrals.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to play something else. Moving on. Go ahead.
Okay, so currently we have Khador at 7, Signar at 6, Crix at 5. The Menoth. I'm curious where you guys think this is going.
I think that we have more love for that faction than a lot of people do, but I want to point out something that we've noticed in the past few events we've gone to. There have been a ton of Menoth players, a ton. We've seen way more than I actually have ever anticipated seeing at an event.
It's interesting that you say that.
Isn't that true?
I think there was 3 of us at Killing Girl out of 30 players. Maybe not that many, maybe 20-something players. No, there were 15 teams of 3. There were 45 players at Killing Girl. I think there were 3 Menoth players.
Really? I'm confident there was more than that.
Like who?
I saw 3 or 4 other people.
Was playing it. Stu Nami was playing Menoth. I was playing Menoth. You were playing Menoth.
I'm pretty sure I saw 3 or 4 other people playing.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't see them.
Because I remember thinking that, and according to when we went out to Des Moines,
there was a lot of Signar players.
Yes, we saw.
No, I do agree. When we went up to Des Moines, there was a lot, but I think that was just an odd tournament.
And I don't think popularity necessarily.
Right. Well, I just want to point. It's interesting to see that it's coming out more.
I think that this is if Menoth is going to take control of the meta again, it's going to be this year.
I agree.
2016.
I will argue, Vince, that I think Menoth has one of the biggest aesthetic turnoffs to new players. Not because it's aesthetically displeasing, the models are beautiful, actually. Mm-hmm. It's that playing a fanatical religious faction is just not incredibly appealing. It's just...
To a lot of people.
They look at it and they go, the Catholic Warmachine kind of feel of it, it turns people off. They just go ugh, I don't want to play fanatical.
They don't want to play religious zealots.
Yeah.
I think out of all the factions that we've discussed so far, they're easily the most survivable.
I could see that. They do have the most staying power of the 3 factions you talked about. The only exception you could talk about is Crix, just with their sheer numbers, is going to win through attrition.
I'm not saying attrition. I'm just saying I think you have to put more into killing each model.
Their models are definitely the most resilient of anything we've talked about.
Jeremy Constance, I love the way he talks about Menoth. He says they're the Mother May I faction. Because if you want to play, you can play 2 really powerful tournament lists that every single time you try to do something, you have to look at your Menoth opponent and go, can I actually do this? And your Menoth opponent might say no. You don't get to.
That's actually one of the most amazing things we'll play in this game. There was a thread on the forums a while back, what's the most, what's your favorite thing about being able to play Menoth? And I'm saying the list of things that were just...
People were just because I get to tell my opponent no.
A lot.
Yeah.
All the time. It's so when they look across the table, it's okay, I love the fact that no matter what faction I'm playing or what's going on, it seems like every single game I get to explain to my opponent he can't cast a spell on something.
Also, they're probably the only, maybe we're going to talk about COC later, but they're probably the only traditional or old school Warmachine faction that can reliably play 4 heavy jacks and consider that a strong choice.
Mm-hmm. They're hands down the Warjack faction, in my opinion.
Right.
And I play conversions.
Right. Even Convergence would say that they're not as strong at... When you can just say, kind of in general, yeah, all my jacks, I can kind of play them +3/+3, you're just like, well, fuck. Like,
that's a lot.
You pointed
that's
out
a lot. That should be like 3 extra points, like, cost for every jack that they have.
Yeah. Something I brought up in the past is that Khador is supposed to be the combined arms faction because they can either go heavily melee or heavily shooting. Menoth, I believe, is the only true combined arm faction in the game because they have so many things in their faction that are actually combined arms. Like the Vanquisher, the Reckoner are both combined arms jacks. Errants, Zealots are both combined arms infantry units. They have solos like the Errant Seneschal that can do melee and range very well. They have casters that can do melee and range or cast spells and do melee.
I will say that...
a large amount of things that can fight you on whatever ground you're going to try and fight them on and have a ability to win in any situation.
it's really hard to put any unit in the game next to Errants and say this unit has just as good ranged and melee as this unit.
It's very hard to have a unit.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the only faction that gets close, and it doesn't get there by number, like you were saying, like in terms of number of models, they have more than any, so I would concede that. I think Retribution, maybe by percentage of different models, Retribution might have more, but that's just because they don't have as many models. But Retribution is the only one who comes close, so I totally agree.
And when we get down to it, when half of the troops are just Knickets,
Only half in your army. They're all in mine.
So
I'm saying that are available.
Oh.
We talked a lot about Menoth. What can't they do?
what can they not do? For the
Competitively-
longest time, their problem actually was breaking heavy brick armor, which is kind of the same problem that Signard had, but they're not as good as killing infantry as Signar is, so they're kind of in a weird middle ground where they excel against your average list, and I feel like they're about to break out of that eggshell, where they're considered to be the best anti-balanced list, and they're actually going to start becoming the faction that starts pushing people around.
What I was going to say is, I feel like when they were designing this game, they did Menoth last. Because it's like, here's Signar, we're going to do really, really well against anything with a single wound and anything with high defense. Here's Khador, we're going to just take everything that has multiple wounds, and we're going to do all that multiple wounds plus 7 every time they swing an axe. And here's Crix, we're going to be able to do lots of different things, but we're going to make them all kind of slow and plotty. You have to use lots of tricks to get them to work. And here's Menoth, they get jack buffs.
Their stuff's better than yours.
It's just kind of like their stats will be higher if they have the right order of activation, and that's it. Kind of you said, they seem to do really, really well against somebody who does a generalist list, because they should be generalists faster and better, because so many of them have combined arms, and so many of their buffs just say +2/+2. Either +2/+2 to defense and armor, or +2/+2 to attack and damage. Because they have that kind of so generically across their faction, and especially in their best casters, like they just seem to get instantly better than your opponent at doing the thing your opponent's trying to do. But if your opponent's doing something that you can't do, like move through terrain...
That's true. That's another one of their big negatives.
Played on a flat, glassy plane, the field was just a flat plane of glass, and you stood at each other 10 inches from apart. If you did, and you could start your armies 10 inches apart and start the game right there, Menoth should win every time.
I will say something that's kind of interesting about Menoth is a lot of their things they do, I don't want to say are all or nothing, but a lot of things they do are based upon a chance factor that you really don't see other places. You were talking about how whenever you're facing conflict against a skew, sometimes you don't know. You can play against, if it's a 50-50 shot, if they're going to be a skew or not a skew, let's just say that that's just the odds, because one or two options, okay? They're a skew or they're not a skew. So there's a chance that you may just come across something and you're like, okay, well, I can't deal with that. Just so well.
Just
so you
because
just
it's a skew doesn't mean that Menoth can't do it.
I know, but it's like, it's chances, statistically. And then, okay, people talk about Menoth. Menoth is also the fire faction. The faction that puts out more fire than any other faction, hands down, bar none. And fire has a 33% chance of not doing anything, for the most part. I mean, that's interesting to consider the fact. Now, I mean, yeah, I think that kind of plays into the whole faith thing, how, it's, the will of God or whatever. It's like, that's always been something that you kind of just like roll over and like, meh, that's okay, whatever. But I think a lot of times if Menoth wins big, a lot of those effects are just going in your way. And that's kind of a thing you see happening. Also, there's not one hand cannon in all of Menoth. Point that out.
They just have rockets.
No, I'm not saying it's a weakness. I'm just
Right.
point out they don't have the most basic weapon in the game.
It's not a basic weapon, it's an advanced weapon.
Yeah, really? Why is hand cannon? Everybody knows generically what it is. Everybody generically knows the stats of what a hand cannon is.
Well, that's just because it's a common
You were
weapon
good at.
to see
There you
on
go.
Warcasters.
Exactly.
And their Warcasters aren't good at shooting things, apparently.
One of their warcasters has a gun.
Are we where we put them? I feel like we spent 4 minutes on the other guys and then 8 minutes on these guys.
So
Yeah.
So, obviously, number 4?
I honestly think they should be doing better than Signar. I think they should.
I think they should do better than Signar.
So I want to push Crix up one because I feel like Crix is...
Let me think. Menoth dropped into the meta better than Signar.
The only reason I feel like Crix would be ahead of Menoth right now is because of how much armor's in the current meta. You see a lot of Colossals right now, and you see a lot of Brickless, you see a lot of multi-wound based troops.
I just don't know what Crix can be dropped into that you're not going to be able to fight something. Whereas I feel like there are going to be times where you drop men off and things.
Crix very rarely doesn't have a game.
This is kind of interesting. We put Signar above Khador because obviously it seems obvious. But in my opinion, I feel like Khador and Menoth do well against similar things, if that makes sense.
But they don't suffer from the same thing.
Exactly.
The problem with Khador is that people that plan for Crix automatically get Khador in the match.
Yeah.
Part of building that list pair, your anti-Crix list beats Khador, and there's just nothing that Khador can do about that.
Right, but that doesn't
play
work.
shitty lists that lose to 80% of the other lists.
But Menoth doesn't suffer from that same problem.
Right.
So
Menoth can just deal with it because they have
Right.
defenders where they have armor 16 troops, they have not infantry
But-
they can take.
But I was going to say they have 4 heavies in one list, and it
they
totally
can take 4
wins.
heavies or 6 lights or 10 lights or whatever. the fuck they
Purification
want.
on a stick.
Yeah.
Blast.
I feel like then for that reason, I think it's actually much better than Signar. Dropping Signar in a meta is always hard. It's always hard.
There's a lot of things that Signar has to be careful of. They have to be careful of the heavy skew armor. They have to be careful of the
Deep health.
assassination casters. They're careful of the box spam. There's a lot of things that Crix is worried about that I think Menoth is worried about less.
You mean Signar is worried about?
Sorry, what did I say?
You say Crix.
Yeah, sorry. Signar is worried about those things, and Menoth is worried less about them.
This makes any sense. The way I'm starting to rationalize this in my mind is I go, okay, I go to a tournament. How exhausted am I playing this faction at the end of the tournament? I think I'm less exhausted playing Menoth.
Okay.
Because Signar always just, every time I play Signar in a tournament, I always just leave there feeling like I've just been on a fucking bull for days, just riding that shit.
Okay, so we all agree that Khador and Signar are below Menoth. Does anyone think Crix is below Menoth?
Yes.
Nope.
I don't think so.
Yes.
I don't think so. I
So
honestly...
if I agree with Jeremy, then it's an even split. Is the problem?
The reason, and this is
As a standpoint of whether I'm introducing a new player, I would introduce them to Menoth over Crix.
I would.
feel like Crix is an easier faction to start with, if that's your argument.
Menoth can be really hard to start with because of all the order of activations.
But I think we're looking at it from a overall power ranking in the current meta, which is the strongest faction. If you were looking at pure competitive play, what would you think the strongest faction would be?
I think Crix. The only reason why Crix beats Menoth is because like I said before,
Because Scar 1 just wins 75% of our games.
there's stuff like that. Scar 1 and Denny 1, you can just put them down against everything in the game. Expixious 2, you can just put them down against everything in the game and have a game. The other reason is the other caster that you play could be Morton Ebra. It could be
Coven.
It could be Witch Coven.
Lich
It could
3,
be Lich
Gorshade
3. Every time you say that, your opponent has to go, oh, fuck. Like, they have to completely change what their idea is in order to deal with that, because all 3 of those casters don't rely upon your opponent to lose or rely upon your opponent to have certain things.
I don't know why, but I just don't find Denny 1 that scary.
Play Khador sometime. See how fucking terrible it is.
If you really
maybe
want,
it's just I've gone up against not experienced
You probably
players.
played Parker, and he's really bad at her. So he lost to a Khador player one time in the last chance qualifier with Denny 1. How bad was that?
Epic fail.
the only thing
We just rolled 3 back-to-back 13s.
but
Okay, I think I agree with Parker and Spence that Crix is slightly ahead of me.
Just because of what they can take, not versus one another.
Right, correct. We're not talking about particularly in the matchups versus each other.
Mhm.
So I'm going to push the other 2 factions down. So we're going to go...
One more thing for the Menoth column is that sometimes the Mother May I stuff that Menoth pays for in terms of points and things you put in the list
That's true.
don't actually work because your opponent doesn't have that thing.
Right.
Absolutely.
And that's what holds them back the most is of all the support and options they have. They can build a list that can beat almost anything, but when you have to spend 20 points on support, that if you take the wrong support choices, you could really get screwed. Like,
Right.
if we're talking about ADR as well, and Menoth got some really strong casters on ADR, like they got like Sevi 1 and like Krios 1 on fucking ADR, like I don't know what would stop them.
No.
Like they would just crush the meta.
Yep.
I don't know what, seriously, like, because Durst is on there. If Sevi 1 made it on that list, and Durst was also on there, it's like, it's fucking game over. They're gonna just fucking stampede through the meta. Because Sevi 1 with ADR is just fucking stupid. He covers 90% of the meta, and then Durst has to cover 10%.
I just don't like Durst.
Fair. So right now we've got Trix at 5, Menoth at 6, Kador at 8, and Signar at 7. Moving on to Mercenaries.
Are we doing different contracts or just saying in general?
As a faction. Obviously, I think Ostrom Earthbreaker is one of their strongest lists, which is usually played in Highborn. Thexus is also strong with the new, obviously the new chapter that came, or charter that came out with all the drudges and everything.
I just honestly don't know why mercenaries don't do a hell of a lot better than they are.
They're just not popular. Like if they had an even share of the market, like 1 in 12 players played mercenaries, I think they'd show a lot better.
I think it's mainly because model-wise, it's like, oh, this model's great, but it doesn't work for this contract.
And they get suffer from character restrictions so much more than any other faction. If you look, like, seriously, the non-character solos in their army are Ogre and Bokur and Goblin Tinker. Those are the non-character solos in their faction.
Another funny thing about them is they're often the faction that somebody plays after they're playing 2 other factions.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll build a Menoth army and a Kador army, and then all of a sudden they go, hey, I bet if I bought 2 units and a Warcaster, I could play mercenaries. Like that's.
And then when they go to a major tournament, they don't play their third faction.
Okay.
They play their first.
Let's take a step back, though, and look about this like the way we're looking at it. We're looking at somebody who actually plays this. They're playing top tier, and they're bringing their best game to a tournament.
No, Mercs have done well at major tournaments.
So my thoughts are, realistically, I mean, given their fair shot, I honestly feel like mercenaries should make a much bigger splash than they do in any given tournament scene. Because when I sit down and I'm playing against a mercenary person, it's experience-wise, but I know less and I have less practice, and it's less polished as to what my enemy's army is going to do or what I need to do against them.
I don't think we can count that into the argument, but I think that is a fair statement.
I think one of the things that Mercenaries does have is they did a really interesting job when they designed all the mercenary casters to make them do things without your opponent like getting to decide if that happens or not. If that makes sense? Like they don't have very reactionary things. A lot of their stuff is just it works. You got to stop it. Like the Earthbreaker is going to work on you. You are going to get hit by the Earthbreaker. You must try to stop it because it is doing all of its work every turn when you're playing a mercenary caster. Like it is. Galleon is doing the same thing. Like it's going to be shooting all your stuff. It's going to be killing you. Like there are like the Conquest. It may never actually do anything. Like you may actually never see it do anything the whole game, and your opponent may not even get to choose that. But I guess what I'm saying is mercenaries. What I'm hearing you say.
Some of the strongest colossals in the game. There's some of the strongest solos in the game.
Right. All their solos are going to get to do their thing because they're really good at what they do. They're basically a whole. They're a faction of Wolverines. They're the best they are at what they do. So as long as you build a list that let them do all those things, you're going to get a lot of work done.
The funny part is they're an odd hodgepodge of those greatest evers.
Where do these suffer, though, against the other factions? So why are they not number one?
The biggest problem they have is actually armor cracking, kind of like Signar does.
Yep.
The way that they try to make up for that is with taking Colossus. The problem is, like, the Earthbreaker does great in melee against Colossals, but POW 13, I don't care how many times you think you can boost the same attack roll, that does not kill Colossals. Like, if someone puts an armor 22 Stormbolt across from you, your Galleon does not kill it. Your Earthbreaker does not kill it in one round unless you get melee on it, and it's probably not going to happen.
Pick one of the... where are they going to put them? Let's give them a splattered number and then move them around.
So what's a good mercenary unit?
Nist Hunters.
I absolutely agree. One of the strongest units in the game. What's another good mercenary unit? Because that's one.
Boom Howlers.
And every one of the units other than Steelheads is character. And Steelheads are not going to win you games. They're a good unit, but they're not going to win you games.
It's true.
So Boomhowlers, Nis.
Okay, now, so are we going to consider these to be, despite having some shining stars, they're not realistically playable on a large scene?
I think Mercenaries can build an amazing list.
Okay.
And that's where I think the faction stops. Because if your list ever goes up against a bad matchup, you lose. Because your other list is not nearly as strong.
Oh, other funny thing, they're one of the factions that, as a whole faction, is ruined by the purification or similar effects.
Can be. That's true.
They don't have a caster that isn't heavily reliant upon upkeeps. One or two of their casters can live without their upkeeps for a turn, but they're going to cast on that turn.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have they really need. They're all buff bots for the most part. They don't have a combat caster. They don't have a caster that pulls up her her big dad pants and goes in. It doesn't. I'm thinking of Ashlyn as the only one that kind of sort of can, but
no, admonition's pretty important.
She can and live, but she can't necessarily to murder something.
Right. Her game plan involves her having buffs out.
All of those things come together for. I'm not saying purification is something you should count on, but it is something that's played heavily in the meta because when you say this one spell on my card can ruin that whole faction's idea of ideal scenario, it makes that faction weaker just automatically. It just does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I was playing Protectorate, I almost never saw people cast it. But as soon as I started playing Magnus, it's
all of a sudden everyone's cast purification all the time.
Oh my god! Iron Aggression! Get rid of it!
Mercenaries are going to be at an 8.
I don't disagree with them. That would push Khador down to a 9.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So where do you want to slide
I thought they were actually at I thought Khador was actually currently at a 7.
No. Sigmar's at 7.
I would put them bottom right now.
You think they're below Khador?
I definitely think so.
Yeah.
I think they're below Khador for no other reason that they're reliant upon kind of one mode of gameplay. And if your opponent has anything that touches that mode, they don't have anything to dig themselves out. So I think
it's mainly because they're
different than Khador.
They're so restrictive.
Right. Khador builds a list to do something, and if you stop them from doing it, you stop them.
But you can actually build 2 different lists in Khador.
You can.
You can.
And I feel like Khador is somewhat combined arms, whereas Mercenaries are not combined arms.
Mercenaries?
No, they're not.
Combined arms. Well, everything in Khador that's combined arms is Nis Hunters, so...
But you can make Nis Hunters faction.
I feel like Nis Hunters are better in Khador than they are in Mercenaries.
You have just as many Nis Hunters in Khador as you do in Mercenaries.
I feel like the ones in Khador are more effective than the ones in Mercenaries.
I think...
Probably true. But Khador doesn't have the Earthbreaker.
Khador has
gun
also...
mages.
But you can play good things in both Khador lists, because you don't have as many character restrictions.
You're able to put a bigger dent in the tournament scene. Mercenaries can't do that. They're going to have a cool showing once in a while. They're going to be strong sometimes, but...
I'm pretty sure that's what
I think as
Dan played last year.
Mercenaries are stronger than Khador at the moment.
Actually,
that's my personal feeling.
Here's something that I'll go down to say. If I was in a final round at a major tournament, and if you gave me the option right then to switch between Mercenaries and Khador, I would choose the Mercenaries, I think. Because I know they're going to be stronger in the meta, I think. That's how I'm thinking about it right now. The problem is if they put down any control effects, Khador loses. If they put down any control effects against my Merc 2-player list, I might just still win. Because I could have a Dougal list where everything goes range 14, and here we go. Yes, you're going to control my movement or whatever for one turn, but I'm still shooting the shit out of your army. So yeah, I think you're right. I think Mercs is better than Khador.
That's interesting.
The only thing I think Khador currently beats in the meta is bad lists. That might sound really terrible, but I don't feel like they do well against strong factions. If you look at it, the factions we have rated above them, Trix and Signar, currently, and Ninoth. All 3 factions that they struggle against.
I'll actually go out and say that as playing Khador, I was never worried about Minos.
I wasn't particularly worried about them, but they do it's not a good matchup for you. I'm certainly more worried about Trix and Signar, but Ninoth does fine.
We're gonna get later, but I believe that Khador ruins Legion, actually, but we'll find out later why.
Well, that's a very specific reason, I think.
Okay, I'm going to say Mercs above, for the sheer fact Magnus 2 kills Brightacus.
Is that a thing?
We have video
All right,
evidence
so
of it.
Spence was right. Mercs are 8.
Mercenaries are now at 8.
Mercenaries are 8. Kador's at 9. Signor's at 7. Meanoth at 6. Crick's at 5. Moving on to the next faction, Legion.
All right. When I first introduced myself to Legion, I had no idea what the hell they were capable of doing. Didn't understand the rules, and I felt like they were broken as hell and they could beat everybody at everything all the time. Now I generally don't mind playing them at all, for the most part. Like, no matter what I'm playing.
Interesting.
I'm like, okay, sure, I'll play Legion. And it's not that I feel like they're weak. I feel like you can play them, for the most part.
You don't feel like they're overpowered anymore.
Yeah, I wouldn't say overpowered. I mean, they're strong. They do what they do, but whenever they're cross table, I feel like I'm able to fight them.
We often talked about like what happens when a player first encounters the faction and like how that changes when you're talking about the meta. The first time anybody reads Legion, they go, "Damn, they just ignore all the rules. Like fuck, all the rules just ignored with Legion. Damn." People feel really butthurt and very salty about Legion as soon as they encounter them. But after you've, like you said, after you've played them for 4 games, played with them, because I played with them for like 3 or 4 dozen games, and then once you play against them a bunch, you realize that it's nothing that special. Like they do what they do really well, which is they do ignore a lot of things in the game, which is kind of their ace. But that's not where their strength lies, and it's not how they get better in the meta. Actually, they're just, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I feel like most people should be able to easily... I'm not going to say easily, that's probably the wrong word. Because I don't want to make the faction seem diminutive, because it's not an easy win. If you're playing against a good Legion player, it's not an easy win at all. And you still have to play them, but I feel like you should be able to play against them.
Legion is the ultimate glass cannon faction. They have great reach, fantastic just kill potential.
Mobility.
If a good Legion player knows exactly what their army is capable of in terms of damage on target, and then they can deliver that damage on target and win that game every time. Like, playing a Legion army is it's like being a quarterback or something. You know exactly how far you can throw, and you know exactly where it's going to be, and you hit the numbers right in the chest every time. If you can do that every time, you're going to be an excellent quarterback. You're going to be an excellent Legion player. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you need to. But the thing about it is, if you don't get that throw exactly right, it just falls apart. It just instantly falls apart.
So you're saying that Legion is not a forgiving faction?
Yes, they have,
but they have high potential.
They have the incredible potential in terms of damage out of their strongest casters. They're a really beast-centered army, so all your points are kind of collected into single places, and you often, because they have incredible threat range, but not incredible actual range. So with aside from Lilith, they actually can't get that far. Ravagors sort of get far, but what I'm saying is you usually have to put all your stuff in harm's way in order to do your thing.
They're kind of like a skirmishing faction. They like to get to medium range and then just kind of do their work. Right,
but I mean, when a Typhon pulls up within 8 inches of your caster, if they have any of their like 80,000 beast buffs on Typhon, you're dead. Like you're dead. It's just too much damage, too much potential. But if you in any way mess that up, Typhon is dead. He's just falls like
it's sort of thing where I feel like maybe it has to do with what we were talking about. Legion, they're waiting to take advantage of you doing something wrong a lot of times and trying to intimidate you or catch you unaware or catch you or do something to you. They're not really bullying you or forcing you across table. They're hoping you react to them instead of the other way around.
Oftentimes when I'm playing against Legion players and the smart Legion players that I've played against, they'll look at the game state at the beginning of their turn. They'll go, okay, I have a really fantastic defensive potential. I can turtle up really well using high defense on multi-wound models with like my beasts. So I'm just going to make all my beasts a little bit harder to kill, and I'm going to put them and I'm going to move them forward 1.5 inches. My whole army has 12 inches to move. Like I could move 14 inches with my beasts, but I'm just going to move 1.5 inches up. Your turn. And like you said, Spence, they're just waiting. They're like a coiled snake, just waiting for you to come at them enough for them to just unload.
It seems like each of their warlocks fits a different role.
Yeah, they're all taking like the same 6 models, and they're just buffing them in different ways.
And all of their infantry is just unplayable trash.
Brandon,
correct.
You're being quiet.
I am. I'm considering what you guys think. I think Legion's very strong currently. Specifically because they have a very strong stable of casters that buff a very strong stable of beasts. Among also playable infantry. It's kind of like when we were talking about Crix. Legion's beasts are so good that people don't play their good infantry, and they legitimately have good infantry. Striders are a strong unit. War Spears are obviously also good.
And now for a message from our sponsor. Crawford cheat sticks, just in case you have to go an extra 1.5 inches and your opponent doesn't need to know it. 7 inches, 8.5 inches, 19 inches, they won't know. It says 7 on the side.
You see, if you just take your tape measure and photocopy it 125%,
It's true.
Easy
and
stuff.
just lay it down,
You do it because it's easier to read, not because you're looking to mislead. The Crawford cheat stick, available at L2 Wargame. Thank you.
you
Wow.
take your 5-inch AOE and blow it up by 150%.
They don't know 5.5 inch AOE. They ain't holding nothing up to it.
Now they're gonna know. This is almost like when Ryan was using the inside diameter metal rings as opposed to the outside diameter metal rings. And he put two of them next to each other, and I'm like, those aren't the same size. He's like, what are you talking about? I just picked up one ring and put it inside the other ring, and I'm like, you fucking cheater. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I bought them at the same place. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. Back to Legion. They have a really strong stable of casters. They're all currently playable. Veil 2, obviously incredibly strong. Veil 1 is overlooked a lot at this point, I think, but she's also incredibly strong.
Mm-hmm.
Lilith 2 is literally broken. She does not fit inside the normal rules of the game and is somehow not played. Saren is really strong. Thagrosh 1 or 2 can be playable as well. They have a lot of access to good casters and good lists.
And you typically see them running, heavier war beats than most
Right.
of the other factions.
Right, so they play a little bit outside the meta than other factions do. Like Crix do, they play more infantry than anyone else. So if you don't come prepared to deal with their list, you're at a natural disadvantage. That's kind of what Legion tries to take advantage every time they come to the table.
Yeah.
If you're not ready to deal with 5 heavies that will have defensive buffs on them, you are going to be at a disadvantage. Which is why dealing with Crix and Legion in the same meta is a fucking pain in the ass.
What are we thinking about placing Legion? Give me
I
your
think
thought.
Legion is probably ahead of Crix at this point.
Really?
I think we should put Legion at 4. Because what does Legion struggle against?
I'm not a Legion player. It's hard to say.
Just looking at what Legion does, what would you say naturally is their counterpart? Things that have high accuracy, high damage output, and it's hard to kill.
What is that?
Trolls. But I mean, think about it. Khador. Khador can kill Legion. They have to get there without losing all their shit. That's the problem. Crix has to be able to hit their beasts. So Angels have a serious problem that they give to Crix. Obviously any problem can be overcome if you have the right tools. So I think they're fine against Crix because they don't have enough quality attacks. Their attacks are copious, but not quality. Menoth can deal with Legion because they have the quality attacks to deal with it, but you still have to have the right list. But at the same time, Menoth struggles to deal enough damage in time because they have problems dealing high amounts of damage. They can hit their beast, they can put boostable attacks on their beast, but they have to actually be able to kill their whole army without losing their army in return. And where Errants are great, they're not going to kill, Spiny Growths, Scythians really quickly. They'll do it, it'll just take forever. While the Scythians kill your entire unit of Errants.
How?
Slaughterhouser.
That's how it works.
Okay. Mercenaries, I think Legion is fine against mercenaries. Mainly just don't get your caster killed, and you'll be fine. Use Church 3 Angels into their Colossal.
I don't know. I just have never seen Legion as something I'm like, holy shit, I need to worry about this.
Well, it's because we don't have a Legion player in our meta. Like, who's our Legion player? And how many times have you played them?
Who's the guy that invented the Crawford cheat stick?
That guy. That's Cody.
Oh, yeah.
How many times you played Cody?
Cody and I play all the time.
How many times? Never once?
At least 150
I don't-
Never once.
I don't think
Have
I
you
played
played
as
Cody?
Legion at all.
Yeah. When's the last time you played against Legion?
That's true.
Have you ever played against Legion?
I have.
How many times?
It's been a little while. James? Last time I played Legion was against James.
Okay, James played like 4 games. That's good. Good start.
Yes.
I played against Jason.
All right, put him at your 4.
Do you agree? What do you think?
I don't think I have the expertise to disagree.
What is your natural instinct on this?
I just don't want to put them above any War Machine faction myself, but that's just...
I
can tell you they're above Warmachine factions.
I agree with that.
It's just... it's hard. I can't... I
And
just
to be
don't
fair,
see that.
Crix is not really a War Machine faction.
I put him at it. I mean,
I
because
put them at 4.
Yeah, they can stay there. We can move things if we need to.
All right. So moving on.
Scorn, bottom of
Scorn.
the list.
Scorn is a 10.
Is that what we're...
Scorn is the Khador of hordes, which is obviously worse than Khador.
Because
To be fair, Scorn just got a huge buff.
you
Because
know what?
their battle engine is now better. Actually is playable good, like
Okay,
worth
beyond
noting.
playable good, is it actually
But hold
good?
on, also the bugs just came out. They have one of the best shooting beasts in the game now, as opposed to not.
I think Scorn suffers from the problem of the fact that they don't have no sharp points. That's the problem with it. Other armies
Sharp
do
points?
things really, really, really well. Scorn does a bunch of stuff pretty good.
That's kind of like what
I
Khador
think
does.
they mainly suffer from we rely on the 2-character beast so much.
They do rely on their characters more than any other Hordes faction, like hands down.
You ever wonder where you stand amongst things? You ever wonder whether or not you're good, bad, succeeding, failing? You should try the Sheely Scale of Fail. Jake Sheely can tell you exactly where you stand in accordance to how good things are.
There's actually one reason why I think they might be better than Khador actually on our list, is because they can actually play 2 heavies in their list and expect those to do
It's
well.
true.
Like, the Elephantis by themselves, Titans by themselves are kind of a thing in Scorn. The fact that I can say, I'm going to play this one model and then kind of have all my Colossals covered, because my Bronze back can one-round your Colossal every time no matter what. Like, being able to say that in the game is kind of silly and awesome.
Why do you let them get the bronze back across the table?
Yeah, that's the other problem. Because
Well, yes.
Because just like Khador, they struggle from control, except unlike Khador, they have 0 control.
I think,
Except for one of them.
Parker, I said this
that's
earlier, I think that
once.
Scorn has no sharp, pointy bits, which is odd considering the fluff, but like Scorn, they do a lot of things okay. They do a lot of
that's-
things well.
They do a lot of armor cracking. They do a lot of threat range extension. They do a lot of buffing.
In order to extend the threat range of their armor cracking, how much are they sacrificing to do that? A lot. I mean, you can take your bronze back, you can get your bronze back cross table onto their colossal. You can do that. That's a bronze back all the way over there in the middle of their army. Just killed the colossal. They're going to take your bronze back now, and now you took away their colossal, you took away their bronze back. Yeah, you took their... But now what else do you have?
You have bronze back.
No, your bronze back's dead.
No, you have 2 bronze backs.
Oh, you brought another one. Okay, then yeah, I suppose it's done. You played a 50-point army, you brought 5 bronze backs and then 5 points of beast handlers, and you're good.
They also have a couple casters that make an interesting part of the game. I'm just trying to make an argument for Scorn. I think they have a couple casters that actually can say this, like boldface. They go, you have to kill all of my things.
Everything
Because-
in my list can kill almost anything. You must kill my entire army.
Yes.
The
like
problem
the-
is the list that you can put on the table that does that has no defensive ability on the board other than maybe a Kreia.
But I
Yeah,
don't
exactly.
think you're teching for them. I think you're just teching for higher armor.
No,
To beat Scorn, or that's what Scorn is doing?
Oh, that's what you're planning for. You're not planning tech against Scorn.
So you're saying that the people that beat Scorn are just accidentally beating them because they're planning on beating trolls?
another thing Scorn does have, unless you're playing Pillars or something like that, Scorn has a prevalency of single wound models and a few deep wound models,
Mm-hmm.
and single wound models just suffer.
They almost like automatically build a balanced list, kind of like Menoth does, because they have, here's my elite battle group of 3 or 4 models, here is my 10 points of support, and then here's 2 units. So they tend to
Right.
always build that formation.
But unlike Menoth, they have no Mother May I.
Unlike Menoth, they have no denial, and they have no control, and they are very weak against controls, where Menoth kind of has some outs for control by just saying, I'm going to control you right back.
Also, they have very few combined arms. They don't have the
Right.
ability
They
to-
suffer from the same Khador problem, where they have lots of both, but none of both.
Yeah.
They have nothing that does both, but they have lots of either. So, like,
So
if
you're-
I want to add some shooting to my list, well, that's 12 points, because you can't add less than that, because that's a unit. So, or a good beast with support.
It's so hard. I mean, Scorn is one of those armies that, like, they're fun to play. They're fucking awesome.
Now
You
do
can-
it with destroyers.
You can net some fucking great goddamn victories with him. You can enjoy the fuck out of playing with Scorn. But I think the problem is, if you try and splash a pot with Scorn, you're not going to get much out of it. I mean, you can't play Scorn into many other factions and say, like, yeah, fuck you, I got this. Like, they don't have a silver bullet for anybody. You can say, yeah, they can kill Colossal, but Jeremy or Brandon are absolutely correct. You can't get a bronze back to a Colossal.
They also suffer from a similar malady to Signar, is that you feel often if you're serious about playing them in the meta, you have to play Pillars of Halak and then something else.
Yes, you feel like you're locked into a certain list pair, which prevents you from actually succeeding.
And
Right.
have you ever played Pillars? I'll tell you, a Pillar of Halak.
It's Fists of Halak, not Pillars
Fist-
of Halak.
fuck yeah,
Pillars of
sorry,
Halak is the name of Xerxes' weapons.
Yes,
Jesus Christ.
Okay, so
I don't even
Fist-
play Scorn.
I hate you. It's late. So, okay, Fist of Halak is an extremely blunt force instrument. I mean, and I'm not saying that makes it bad but it's like when you're playing it, you are literally just slamming it to your opponent. You're just like, boom, here.
Well,
And then they
it does
fight
what it
back.
does.
Yeah, and that's
And you put the 2 character beasts in it, and
Just one of them.
But I'm sorry, I don't care.
the 2 times
Pillars
I
of
played
Halak.
against it.
Pillars of Halak. Point for point, pound for pound, Pillars of Halak is overpowered, and that's the reason why it's... Sorry.
Fist.
Fist.
Okay.
The Halaki thing.
That's overpowered, though.
I don't think it's actually overpowered. I think it's a strong list.
I think it's, in terms of points and what you could build, like how many, like, it's a health stacking list, right? It's just very deep.
It is, but it doesn't actually stack armor.
I think the
No,
first
it doesn't
time
stack
you're
armor.
the first time you play against it, you're like, oh my god. And the next time it's like, oh.
Well, it's a list that wins in deployment. When you deploy your list, if your opponent cannot deal with that many hit points behind armor 15, they lose. Because you can kill anything with that list.
Yep.
You can run Iron Flesh Chaosies at it, they'll murder it. You can run fucking Warders at it, they'll murder it. It's all about if your opponent has the tools to kill you. That's how the list wins.
But
So-
and in my opinion, that is a really strong meta list. When your list can say, you must overcome this problem, or else I win, that is an extremely strong meta list.
I
I'm
think
not
it's a
saying
skew. I think it was stronger until people started doing that so often that everyone pretty much has to bring an answer for it.
It's the Rochambeau cycle. Like you start seeing people take advantage of something that everybody else.
But when you get to the point where you line up against somebody and you're like, I'm playing Scorn, they just drop the list that does better armor cracking against you because your other list has armor 19 Titans in it. It doesn't matter. Both your lists have armor 20 models.
I also have not lost a Scorn in recent memory, so
Okay.
I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that
bottom of the list. Moving on.
I do think we should talk about the factions, but I don't know that there's any reason we should.
There's just not enough to talk about with Scorn. I mean, you basically plan to face Runes of War, and then
Fists of Lock, you mean? Or
no.
right.
You make a list
when
to
you're
deal
trying to when you're trying to deal with Scorn,
Yeah.
it's just like Hador. They get solved by something else, so they're not an issue.
Exactly.
What do you think? Better or worse than Kador? Because Kador is currently worse on the list.
I think they might be worse
They are.
because
Lack of combined arms options.
I think they might be worse because they don't have a Sorsha. Like that's honestly like
I would
They don't-
agree that I don't think they have a super
I mean-
good caster.
I agree.
I think Kador has enough higher defense stuff that you.
They can at least play two
Yeah.
different ways to play the game.
Mercenary.
They can play extreme offense or defense, where Kador or Scorn can only play offense.
Yeah.
Mercenary options are a thing.
That's true. What are you talking about? You got Crow Raiders.
Oh, it's true. Game fixed.
So Scorn is now 10, which is last. Trolls. I think Trolls are obviously the strongest they've ever been in the meta.
I think trolls are incredibly too strong. So I
think this is the region that Legion isn't like number 1 or number 2.
I think trolls are possibly the strongest thing in the game.
I would not disagree with that statement. They're possibly the strongest thing in the game.
Trolls have so many.
Everything.
God,
There's so many options.
Yeah.
Everything.
Trolls
What do
just
they
have-
not have?
What can Trolls not do? That is a very short list. Maybe
I don't-
B Speed 10.
I don't know.
Do they have
which-
snipe?
They do have snipe. They have the most snipe of any faction.
I don't know which troll blew the game designers of this game because I feel like
They get
'cause,
everything.
no, they don't get everything. That's the point. I mean, honestly,
What can't
the
they
funny-
do?
They get good
No, I don't
stuff,
think
though.
they do. I don't think they get everything. I think it's just really funny because it's like they started as the bro faction, this kind of gimmicky thing, like let's all have beer and yeah, let's give these guys the ability to shoot fire out of their mouths and like yeah, they shoot beer out of their mouths and it makes fire. Like
This one
it's
carries a keg.
and yeah, and he was like that one, and it seems really funny. And then somebody went, well, what if they had to light themselves on fire in order to get the buff? That'd be cool. What should the buff be? How about they do infinity damage? With the buff?
Infinity damage and infinite tough.
And you're just and you're like, what?
Like, it's so goddamn
be it.
unreasonable to consider the fact that they can be unreasonably durable, hit hard as a fucking Mack truck, They hit ridiculously accurately. They not only
They're not.
hit the
Let's be
physical-
fair. They're not ridiculously accurate. They're just very accurate.
Yeah, 8 across the board is not really hard to get for them at all.
They're not Signar accurate, but they're accurate.
It's just
They're not Signar accurate. That's actually a fair point.
sure.
They're not.
Okay, well, let's give them
They're
second
Colossal's
highest.
Mat 5. How can they be that accurate?
That's true. Colossal's terrible, so the faction's crap. It's such bullshit, is what it is. As a faction, trolls are effectively bullshit. I've never met somebody who's like, yeah, I'm going to systematically put together this troll army. It's all like, yeah, I like them because they're kind of cool. And then they put fucking trolls on the
Anything.
table.
Just
It's
anything
like-
from
and
the
it's like-
faction on the
And then
table.
you're sitting there fucking trying to like, well, I guess I got to try and kill that guy who has a gun. Hey, that unarmored dude over there that has a gun, what's he? It's like, oh, he's defense 15, armor 19, 8 wounds, and tough. I'm like, okay.
Immune knockdown.
Immune to knockdown, and he's under. He's immune to continuous effects. You can't go through him with the corporal, and by the way, he also gets +2 strength, and he has +3 armor, and he's behind a wall, and it's like,
Oh, and I haven't activated this faux color.
so that's an
yet,
8-point
so-
model. He's like, no, it's 1. It's 1 point. FAU. I'm like, fuck you. Like that's how that. When you're, no, I'm
Okay,
telling you,
I wish
everybody
you could see Spence's face how actually legitimately upset he is right now.
Every fucking time I play against trolls, like I look across Halo, I'm like, I don't care what any model does because every one of them is exactly that model. Every fucking one.
They're frost giants in disguise,
The
Spence.
fact that that's exactly the fact that really when it breaks down to it, fucking what's the guy's name? What's their fucking Madrick 2? The fact that he is like unfucking killable. Like
He's
their
not even
leader-
the most unkillable caster in the faction.
Ah,
No,
it's
he's
so
not.
fucking
Borka
stupid.
is so much tougher than he is.
This is stupid. Like, I mean, no, seriously, like, they designed Scorn and they designed fucking Trolls. They designed them in the same fucking building, okay? These assholes put this shit together, and you look how fucking overly broken and fucking rewarded one faction is, and the other one has nothing.
This is interesting because you started the whole thing with trolls have been as strong as they've ever been. One of the weird things about trolls I think is very different than some of the other factions is they have been blessed by their releases more than any other faction. When trolls got first released, they were the support faction. You had to minimally spend like 8 to 9 to 10, 12, 13 points in support in order to play trolls, and the supports didn't do a whole lot except support. And then they kind of had generalist troops and lower powered beasts and you needed all these kind of stacking buffs, and a lot of them were passive. Like that was their whole thing, that they didn't have to do anything super actively. So that's why you could like run with stones and just kind of get elemental communion by being around stuff. Like when they came out, they were very much we benefit from being together, and we're all medium based. It was all very kitschy and had the bro thing in it, and people didn't like them, and they weren't considered to be strong because generally so much of their armies wasn't actually able to kill anything because you spent so much on points on support. And then they had a couple expansions, and every one of their expansions just broadened their abilities and deepened their abilities and just made things just layer on top of each other in such a way that now people are complaining like that there's not enough game design space in the faction because every time they make something, they have to be so worried that it automatically gets broken by all these passive effects that get to hang around their models.
You have to assume every troll model has +2 to every stat when you design it, because
right.
I think at this point they literally can do +2 to any stat based on buffs they can find somewhere in the faction.
They did an interesting job at the beginning. They seemed like this kind of buffy faction that relied upon a lot of support to work, but in a different way than Menoth. Now they just seem like this just juggernaut of unstoppable blue meat that just moves towards you lazily and just literally flops its big fat blue cock on you and just and suffocates you.
I had so little fun playing against trolls.
So the typical trolls for the longest time has been heavy brick. But what they've really experienced lately is because they used to have to build super heavily to deal with the Crix or the Khador, the Weapon Master spam lists.
Right.
But with the releases they've gotten lately, like the Highwaymen, the Scattergunner UA, Grim 2, Fire Eaters, Bombers, all of these things have helped fix those problems to the point where they have so many options to deal with it that they don't have to strain anymore to deal with those problems.
Nope.
Like, you can play Gunbjorn now. Like, playing Gunbjorn a year ago would have been a joke. Like, everyone was like, you're an idiot. You're playing the worst caster in your faction. Now he's like, legitimately, you could win a major tournament with Gunbjorn because they've added so many options to the faction.
Who's the worst trollcaster?
The worst trollcaster? Jarl, because he has the worst aesthetic. Because that's the only... There's no bad trollcaster.
Okay.
Literally every caster in their faction could win a major tournament. You would not be surprised.
Yep.
Gristle 1 is amazing. Gristle 2 is amazing. Doomy 1 is considered one of the best casters in the game because of his team force. Doomy 2 is strong. You know, Jarl is fine. Calandra is amazing.
I agree with you.
Madrak 1 and 2 are both broken. Borka 1 and 2 are
Trevor
great.
pointed out the fact that they give a point cost reduction on fucking Rune Shapers was stupid.
That's not even the problem with the theme force.
It isn't, but why would they add that on there?
It's that you get 3 walls in one list. That's the problem.
FAU for like a fucking unit. Okay, a lot of factions get FAU, but fucking point cost
Okay,
reduction
if
on
Rune
that?
Shapers was a problem, you'd see 10 units of Rune Shapers.
That's not the problem. It's just like, why would they add that much? It's like, here, just give trolls more shit. Why? Because let's just give trolls more shit. Because we like derpy fucking half. Dude, I'm so fucking mad at trolls. Like, I mean, we've had this conversation. I play Menoth, which, I mean, struggles already with trolls. It's like,
I think the problem is because you play Menoth.
every time I see him as a faction, I just look at him like, what is anyone supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, seriously, what is anybody supposed to do against that faction? No, I don't know. And it's like whenever you're getting beaten by fucking Lenny, the mildly autistic fucking big retard. That's how it fucking feels playing against trolls. It's like these derpy fucking...
It's like they're not even trying, they're just being retards and they're killing
just
you.
rolling over and you're like, okay, well, there's nothing I could do. I mean, it's me being a whiny bitch is what it's... I'm being a whiny bitch, but it's fucking...
It does feel true. The only player I've ever felt like he was a troll player and he didn't beat me by accident was Ryan. Like, he's the only player I've ever played against that wasn't like, I guess I'll do this, and then it happened, for him.
And you're just like, I guess, yeah, that's how you win.
Right.
You just choose to do that.
Right.
And did he beat you because he chose to, or you beat him?
I feel like it's kind of funny. If I felt like I was really serious about winning this game, like I was really serious about making sure I always won.
Did not care about fun. You simply wanted to win the most possible games.
I just wanted to win the most possible games. I would have a collection of trolls, and I would get good at a couple different lists until I feel comfortable with a good pair. And then I would go to every major tournament I went to, I would play a different pair. So people had no idea what the fuck I was doing, and it was always good. Like, because you could do that. You could totally do it. What, Brandon, didn't you come up with the idea that we were going to go to a 5-man?
Yeah, we were going to do Kill and Grill. It was supposed to be a 5-man team event. We were all going to take trolls, and we were all going to play. Because you can't duplicate casters.
Right.
And we were just all going to play different troll casters.
But
we were going to play 10 of the 13 trolls.
And there was no way we could be beaten.
Just no other faction.
We all agreed there was no way to lose.
Like, how has Privateer Press seriously done that? Like, I mean, it's like they've not done that with anything else in the game.
No, Crix.
One faction.
Crix is how that works.
Really? I mean, Crix has some less popular, not as good casters. Crix has some units that are less popular, not as good. I feel like no matter what...
Crix has an easily 10 deep bench.
It's so goddamn holy. It's just... It's unfun. It's...
I love how much you hate trolls. It's so amazing.
Dude, I'd rather play Denny 2 and Haley 2
every game forever than play trolls once.
Having awkward lesbian sex together on the table together with both their armies against my 35 points of Kraos 2. I would rather play that game than play any legitimate game against any single troll caster against somebody who doesn't know the rules. I would rather play that. Like, it's...
I feel like competitive players, for some reason, like really competitive players, don't play trolls, and I feel like non-competitive players do. So in my experience playing games, very rarely have I ever actually been beaten by trolls at the competitive meta level, because those people are for some reason not playing trolls. I don't know why that is. It sounds like but it sounds like it's people who don't want to win play trolls. But I don't understand why the people that I've played that I know are really strong are not playing trolls. Because they are so good.
Because your whole army just goes, oh, yuck?
Like, is that it? Like, it's just because the whole army is a buck-tooth retard?
I think a lot of people don't get into trolls because they have such a lack of maneuverability. The army is very static on the board. They have very powerful effects because of that. But a lot of skilled players want mobility, if you notice, I feel like, and control. Yeah. And trolls don't bring really control or maneuverability.
Luckily, they don't care about those two things.
Luckily, they don't need those things to win.
Yeah, they don't care at all about those two features of the game.
But I think that's honestly why a lot of people stay away from it. Like playing Legion and trying to move from Legion to Trolls would be such an obscure movement, I think, that you would just not be able to do it. Like, if you had been like a JVM that had played Legion for like 10 years, and you tried to move into Trolls, it'd be such a night and day change that I think you would make it.
I did play Trolls right before the end of Mark 1, and I only wanted to play Grim Angus ever because I tried to play some of their others, and I hated being a brick.
Mm-hmm. So, you're like, God, I feel like I'm just pushing a beach ball across the board.
Right, yeah, it didn't feel fun at all. So I decided to switch into Grim Angus, and of course he was the only other kind of non-brick troll at the time. Now there's 80 of them, but there was, at the time I was like, oh wow, this guy's really fun to play because he's trolls and he's not doing what trolls do. So maybe that's what it is. Players just don't want to play this, and I don't know if it's bricky, more static. It's just not.
I would say static more than bricky. A lot of their stuff is slow, and the movement buffs they have are limited.
Yeah. But man, that just, every time somebody drops Runes of War against me, I go, well, I'm going to have to play really hard. And this is going to be a win by scenario points, and it's going to come to time.
So, I think we've probably talked about Trolls enough. What do we think? 3?
I don't think that's a discussion.
I know where Spence is putting them.
Yeah, and the fucking garbage.
Parker, what do you think?
If I didn't like every troll player I've ever met, because I like every single person I've ever met that plays trolls, I like the people. But if it wasn't for that, I would have flipped the fucking table years ago. Like, I mean, if one of the people I met in this game that was a fucking asshole put trolls on the table against me, I'd be in jail right now.
Nice.
It's that frustrating.
I better never put trolls on the table against them.
So, what is our top list right now? What's the top?
Currently,
list?
Legion is at 4.
Legion's at 4.
I think Trolls is currently stronger in Legion. I think as a boogeyman, Trolls are just more current.
I think the funny thing is we're talking about like trumping. I think Crix does so well against Trolls most of the time, but now Trolls
they're just
like,
not scared of Crix anymore. That's the problem.
Right.
Is they got their boogeymen out of the game. Like, what is Trolls afraid of?
They literally can play like 3 different lists that just ruin. Crix.
I know it. I know exactly.
You know what Trolls is afraid of?
If you're a troll player, I know what you're afraid of.
What's that?
Girls.
Okay.
If you're a troll player, you are afraid of things with vaginas. That's what it is.
Okay. Am I just going to write a 3 down, or are we going to?
I just put them all.
I don't think.
What's going to pop?
I can't hear Parker. Hold on.
We're not going to be able to get them out of the top. Go for it.
All right. Trolls are 3. Moving on. Circle or Burrows. I actually think they're incredibly strong right now as well, mainly because of the disparity of lists they can bring to the table.
Yeah.
Bradigus has been a big problem. He's subsided as of late, but he's still a problem. And then Kruger 2 has been a strong list for a very long time. The nerf to Stones finally, I think, brought him back down to a reasonable level. Morvana 2 is still really strong. I think Kaya 2 is overlooked very often. She's also very good.
Circle has like some of the best hidden casters. I think Baldur 1 has always been amazing, and he'll always be amazing. I think some of the shit he can do is just off the charts.
I think the skill required to make him good is rare, but I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah, I think things like Baldur 1 is amazing at doing what he does, and what he does is not super flashy, but man, it can do some cool stuff. Like you said, Epic Kaya can be completely OP, and she can have some of the most one-sided matchups in this game. Just like, you can put her down and, like you said, win a deployment. Man, she can just... And the funny thing is, she wins the deployment, but your opponent does not know they've already lost.
Yeah, they're still playing through the motions, and you're like, I'm backing up stuff.
Yeah.
Circle's always
I was also going to say that Morvana has always been strong, and she hasn't really changed from being strong. People just figured out what she did, that's all.
I would be surprised if she wasn't nerfed fairly soon. I think that she's still ahead of the curve.
There's somebody else in there that I was... Cassius is not necessarily a tier 1 caster, but he can do such weird, janky stuff. He's a great gotcha caster, which wins in the meta sometimes. He's a fantastic gotcha caster. There was somebody else, though. Chromac is actually a meta choice.
Chromac and Chromac 2, I think, are both going to see a lot of play. Well, I mean, Chromac has seen his play, and people know what he's for.
Chromac too.
He deals with a lot of, like, the Crix and anyone that relies on spells, and he is just also a strong list. But I think Chromac 2 is going to see a big...
Especially with him being on ADR.
Right, him being on ADR. It's going to be like basically an alternate Kaya 2 where you just brick up and run at people.
Here's the problem with Circle that I was actually going to say more than anything else, is of every faction in the game, I think they are the least forgiving.
That is possibly true. I do absolutely. I usually people will come to me as a PG and they'll ask me, like, what do you think about me starting Circle? I'm like, don't play Circle.
For the love of God.
Don't play Circle. Don't play Ret. Don't play Convergence.
Don't play Trolls.
Yeah.
That's a different reason. Circle, Minions, Retribution, and Convergence are all just do not start as factions.
Mhm.
Like, if you want an easy to start as faction, do not go to these things. Do not have that be your first faction. I cannot stress that.
I have seen now a handful, like not even one or two, can't even say the word couple. I gotta say a handful of people that have come in and out of this game like a revolving door, and they walked right in with Circle and they walked right back out.
Mhm.
Like, they're just,
To be fair, actually, now that Chromac 2 is out, that might be at least a place for them to start, because he's pretty obvious. You just take heavies and run at people.
Big chunk, throw chunk.
Even then, people get so mad because they're heavies. They have higher defense, but not as high as Legion, and just as bad armor. They don't have fantastic mat on their beasts and that kind of stuff. Like, they have.
Yeah, but most of their beasts have a built-in buff.
What, primal? Like, their buff is
No, like Stalkers can
Yeah.
get Prowl, so they're a little bit forgiving if you know how to take advantage of terrain.
But again, that's
Sprint. There's options.
But one of the problems with Circle is, like, the reason why I think they're unforgiving, we've already hammered this in, but if you, a Circle player versus a player who's already played a dozen games, the Circle player loses. Like,
Right. There is no exception. It's just like Signar. You must have at least the skill of your opponent to win the game.
yeah.
That's true. It's like this, okay? You ever seen two kids fighting, like, on a YouTube video, okay? And you got, no, walk me through this, okay? And, like,
We watch different YouTube channels.
I watch kids fighting. That's what I do. So,
No, you watch kids crying.
I enjoy kids fighting. So you have two kids fighting, okay? And you always see the video of, like, the bully getting his ass kicked by that little kid, and you're all like, nope. I feel like Circle's like that little kid, okay? A lot of these factions could beat the fuck out of Circle if it was a squared up fight, okay? And it's like, if it was just like head on head, let's go, that's fine. But once Circle figures out all their little tricks and all the little nuances to what they do, it's a learning curve thing.
If you misposition a model by a quarter of an inch in Circle, you probably lose the game. Like it's that important to get your shit right. So, I think the strongest part of Circle is the number of completely different lists they can bring that are all A-list competitive. Bradigus is incredibly strong and takes a completely different list to play against than Kruger 2. That takes a completely different list to play against than Morvana 2. That takes a completely different list to play against than Chromac or Kaya 2. Like, any of these lists require dramatically different things, and depending on which of the three Circle players you get paired against is going to be if you can possibly win that game or not. I think that's the strongest part of Circle right now. But at the same time, I think they might be the least forgiving faction. So, I mean, you have the highest chance of your opponent making a mistake at the same time.
I'm going to say 4.
I think it's a good start. So you're saying push up Trolls to 2?
Yes.
And leave Legion at 3?
No, Legion goes up 2.
So Legion to 3?
Yes, Legion to 3. I'm sorry.
So Trolls would be 2. So Spence is recommending Trolls go to 2, Legion go to 3, and Circle come in at 4.
Yes.
And what's below Circle?
Below Circle would be Crix.
I believe Circle is below Crix.
All right. That's what Parker thinks. Jeremy?
I was actually going to say right above Signar, which is...
That would put them where Parker's suggesting.
Yeah.
So, just flashing back to Crix.
I'm just mainly thinking that right now, you're just teching against Bradigus.
But that's the thing, you don't, as a Circle player right now, you don't have to take Bradigus. You take Morvana 2, Kruger 2, you take Morvana 2, Chromac, you take Kaya 2, Kruger 2, and people have to build the beat Bradigus because it's so strong. They have to at least think about it in their list pair. Or you play Bradigus, and if they don't match it, then you win. Because it's one of the strongest SKUs in the game. You just go maximum hit points.
I'm just going from the point of, say, the past 10 Circle videos I've done
Are all Bradigus?
Are all Bradigus.
That's fair. I don't think Crix are ahead of Circle. That's just currently what I feel. I don't know that's right. I don't feel like after the Denny 2 nerf. See, the problem is now that Denny 2's been nerfed, everyone's going to play Lich 1 or Lich 2 Scar 1, which beats Bradigus.
I think Crix is actually ahead of Circle because even though we mentioned that there are a lot of hidden gems in Circle, we know that the Crix pool is extremely wide and we know their ability to change like shape and form is very, like it's very infinite.
But
Like,
they don't
it's-
change form as well as Circle does. Circle legitimately changes their entire list.
Does that make them better, though?
I don't know that it does.
You know what? The thing is, now this is not just...
How about this? This is the way I'm looking at it right now. If I'm getting paired against somebody, I'd rather it be Crix because I know what I am going to see from Crix. I know exactly how to play against Crix because 90% of the stuff they play in their 2-list pair is repetitive from player to player to player.
I will say, though, in contention to that, just because you see the circle models over there, once you put your models on the table, because you're still going to play the same list against whatever circle is going to be, that doesn't change anything. They're going to make a mistake before that Crix player is going to make a mistake. It's going to happen. And a loss in a Crix army is what? Something that adds to their attrition, whereas a loss in a Signar, a loss in a circle army is a loss of game.
Well, I'm outvoted here regardless, so I'm changing it, but okay. So we've got Trolls at 2, Legion at 3, Crix at 4, Circle at 5.
Okay.
Moving on, Minions.
Minions don't have the breadth to play, so...
Minions are stronger now than they've ever been because they just got Croak Raiders, just got Sacral Vault, they just got a new caster, Jaga Jaga, it's pretty good. That obviously still leaves them lacking. I think that they're probably the worst faction. I don't know if anyone would dispute that.
I think that's just...
I know this is going to upset Adam, but I think 11 right now.
He's bad and they should feel bad.
When they do well, I appreciate it. And I
They're
think
still
it's great, but...
not a faction.
And once again, this game is so balanced compared to a lot of other games. The difference between 1 and 12 is probably like 15% in effectiveness. So, I mean, best faction, worst faction is a comparable level.
Mhm.
Well, there have been plenty of minion players that have taken,
Right.
Gators out and done really well with them. That's not, I mean...
All right,
Winning major
let's
events.
move on to number 12.
Now that we're done talking about them,
Number 12.
we're on the 11th faction so far.
No, I'm saying.
Oh, okay, I got you.
It's going to be number
Retribution. The other not faction.
When
You say-
Thyron's feet lasted the entire game,
They were still 12.
no one cared.
No, not one person did. Here's the thing about Retribution. I'll say peace about Retribution because I have a special place in my heart for them. They'll always be the one that got away for me because the problem with, if there is a problem with them, or sorry, there was a problem with them before the not this last expansion, but before that, there was a big problem with them is they could only run like 2 or 3 viable things. They are very, very, very restricted in terms of their unit choices in particular. And it's kind of like what you said, Brandon, like when somebody said I'm playing Retribution, you go, okay, well you're playing Mage Hunter Infiltrators and probably the Dawn Guard with the big swords. Like you're probably doing that. So I can do that. Fine. Also, we had a lot of things in, like, when you played a Retribution list, they kind of suffer from the same thing as Khador, which is the stuff you're using to deal with other factions is already dealing with me also.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had a couple really, really nice expansions, and now they have the ability to deal with a lot of other things, like stealth is much less of a problem for their meta. They're going to have a ridiculous armor skew when they get the new Colossal and the Mini Jack skew with Epic
Viros.
Like they're going to have just a ridiculous armor skew when that thing hits, and I mean, that's future meta, not current meta. And the one thing that they do have that's really interesting, I talked about this a long time ago. Every once in a while, I'll be playing a game, and I'll be looking across at my opponent, and I'll be going, "Fuck! If I was playing Retribution right now, this would be so easy."
If you're playing Retribution right now, they'd be playing entirely differently.
That's the thing. Like Raven just wins 60% of her games.
Yep.
The problem is you lose 40% of your games.
Yep. And
I mean, she has an amazing mechanic that gets you 60% of your games as wins.
and Ron
But to get those 60%, you have to lose 40%.
right. And Ron says your army and my army is not where it is right now.
And my
Right.
army does way more than it should.
I'm going to force multiply and control,
But it's
manipulate
Retribution.
stronger than, in my opinion, stronger than anybody can possibly do in the game. Even over Captain Feat, that actually is a telekinesis feat, I think Ron actually moves around the board better.
When you look at how you go into a tournament to think about other people that are going to be there, very much like Minions, like nobody looks and says, "Okay, but what's going to be my anti-Retribution tech, or what do I have to do?" If you ever get paired against Retribution, you think to yourself, "Okay, this can be cool," and you're going to enjoy the game. But I've never thought to myself like, oh shit, not this again. It's Retribution. I mean, not to knock it as a horrible faction. I know we do all the time, and I know we alienate every bit of our Retribution listeners out there, both of them.
So
but it's
here
now, realistically, Ron as a caster cannot be the worst faction.
No.
Ron in a faction automatically puts it at not dead last.
well, they're above minions,
Right.
unfortunately.
Now that we've agreed on that, moving to the next, Scorn.
They're
I
not
think
better
they-
than Scorn.
Are
I
they
think beat
not?
Scorn.
They're not better
I think they
than
beat Scorn.
I think they beat Scorn.
I can't possibly agree with that. You all can outvote me all you want, but I'm not possibly agree with that.
Jeremy is just angry eyes over here like, no.
I'm not agreeing with any of this.
Have you played against the Raven Theme Force?
No.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, I've seen
Okay.
it.
Okay.
I
You don't-
get it. It's just I dislike the faction so much.
I absolutely agree, but I'm looking at this from a professional point of view.
One of the things that I think,
I would put them below minions if I could.
here's the other thing about Retribution that I think we're colored. Like one of the things that colors our
Mhm.
conversation about Retribution is that for better, for worse, I don't think because it actually it's a bad tournament meta idea. There's never been a super quality player champion them to try to make them stick out.
At least nonsense. For a long time, they were legitimately bad.
Right.
Like, they were legitimately bad for a very long time.
Okay, here,
Yes.
I'll throw this
And
out.
no one actually good has played them since they've been competitive.
Exactly. That's one of, and so I think it kind of suffers from the troll thing, which is I never see fantastic players play trolls, but I know they're good because idiots win with them.
Okay,
so
so let's look
Retribution
at this, though.
is the opposite. I've never seen a fantastic player play Retribution, so I actually don't know their full
I
potential.
look at this. Okay, there are two players around here that I really honestly think are fairly good players. Okay, you and Danny have both talked about. Okay, Danny bought all of Retribution and he played with them
And
a little bit. And I mean, people could talk.
You
up or
weren't
down.
there. He sold them.
I know.
Oh,
I saw
okay.
that. I was on Facebook. But no, what I'm saying is like he was like he's gonna do really well with him. He's gonna bring something out of him. Now I don't want to talk about why he quit or what his idea was. It's like, but I've heard so many people talk about what they're gonna do with it. Parker sitting here on this podcast is talking about how like he's gonna do this someday. Look, it's never gonna fucking happen. No one's going to. There's
I feel like
nothing
To be fair, Max has bought, almost the entire faction?
No, he has everything.
and Max has never lost a
It's
game.
everything. That's true.
But-
He's never lost with Red.
I've seen him do more work on this little bit of Signar he has
That's true.
ever.
He spent more time putting together
They're
4
not-
hunters than...
They're not here. If there is something secret in there, nobody's unlocked it.
No, they're an assassination faction. That's what they do. Their faction is built to assume every list you play has at least a 40% of your build is to kill their caster. I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure. And to be fair, that's honestly why they're bad. And not because they want to assassinate, but because they have to try to assassinate.
Yeah.
Everything in their faction is skewed towards trying to kill a freaking warcaster, that they cannot have good things because it would make the things that they already have too good. So that's how they are built. That's the thing. Like, Raven's Theme Force is not about killing your caster. It's like, kill your fucking army. I have 40 models with really good guns that kill all of your models.
Mhm.
And then you have to beat me with what you have left. Or I just try and kill your caster.
I mean, and like I said, despite myself being all fucking belligerent and stupid half the time, I hate alienating an entire faction and like telling all of our listeners who are like, "Hey, fuck you guys."
Well, not all, because like 2 of them play Red.
I mean 1.5 because the other guy he just bought the shit because his buddy was selling it.
Okay.
But I just
Okay, how about this? I think Rhett is better at assassinating than Makeda 2.
that's not hard.
So
You know,
Makeda 2 is bad?
No, Makeda not bad, but you know how
Okay.
you know how you prevent Makeda from killing your caster?
You just make
Read sidestep.
consecutive circles.
You just read sidestep.
You just read sidestep a lot.
That is what sidestep does. Okay. That's how I don't get killed. I just... When Retribution shows more internationally, not just Will Pagani taking it to an event and like winning something. When Retribution shows more, I think anybody will care about them as a faction. That's going to be the problem.
But I think
We're not talking about how often they get played, though. We're talking about how
Right.
good they potentially are.
That's what I'm saying.
I think
I'm saying this
and
has already been
also-
explored by everybody.
And we also talked about this before, like with groupthink, like how much has groupthink decided that Retribution is bad?
No, I
Because
definitely think that's the thing.
I love this joke. I think Muse invented it. The Retribution player, Like whenever they post something that has a Retribution model from something they see at a con, like, hey, the Retribution player is probably really happy. Like it's this wonderful running joke that there's only one, but that stereotype, that funny little joke is rooted in a lot of truth. It's seen as a faction that no one wants to play for some reason. It's the pariah faction. It's the
to get into it, you want to do the special unique sunflower thing. So what you do is you want to play this faction that's different than all the other factions, because it is different in its own little way. There are they're tech elves. Tech elves are different than steampunk anything. And if you're somebody who's more into the sci-fi, more into the tech level of the game, and you like robots, then you're like, okay, awesome, I'm going to get tech elves. And elves are better than humans, so you're already the kind of person that doesn't like being a fat, lazy human. You want to be a cool, lit, beautiful elf in tech armor, and you think that's going to go somewhere. It's not what it actually is, though.
So how about this? When we look at Ret as far as attracting players, their aesthetic is so different than the other factions in the game that anyone that is attracted to that aesthetic starts with them, fails, and quits the game.
Yep.
Therefore, the majority of people that would play Ret never got into the game because they had such a bad start. Therefore, the majority of their players are still not playing this game.
How about this as an example? Okay, I love Connor. Connor's one of my favorite people who plays this game, okay? Connor got into the game with Retribution, and that's something that I see happen. People get attracted to the game based on the things that's a little bit different, and that's his flavor of things, and that's okay, because we all like different things. But then after realizing how difficult it was going to be to win with Retribution, he decided to pick up a Hordes faction, like a lot of people do. They get a Warmachine faction, they get a Hordes faction. He went to the next thing, which seems like, what else? He went to Circle. He's still a player that's fairly new to the game, then steps into another faction similar to that. It's like, flavor-wise, he's not somebody that delved into this game getting into that. And I feel like if it wouldn't have been for the bullshit of Retribution, he probably would have picked up Signar and been doing a hell of a lot better.
Back to the point at hand. Spence, you think Scorn is better than Retribution?
Yes.
You think legitimately rules-wise they are, or you just want to say that?
No, I honestly feel like they're a better faction. I feel like they place better. I feel like they do better. And I feel like that's... Okay, now, if we want to come up with brass tacks as the reason why, I'm going to go ahead and absolve myself from coming up with reasons. I'm going to show you, and it could be groupthink, but if you look across the board, everybody, if you take everyone's experience with this, people pick up Retribution, they walk into a store and are like, I'm going to play Retribution, and they try. And it doesn't do anything. More people play Scorn, more people get more out of Scorn than get out of Retribution. Could you potentially...
I think people stick with Scorn longer than they stick with Retribution.
That could be true.
Jeremy? Parker, we know what Jeremy thinks. What do you think?
If it's better, is Retribution better than Scorn?
Yes.
In a tournament meta, all things being equal, you're dropping him into a random meta chance. I think your two-list pair with Retribution should go farther in the tournament than your two-list pair with Scorn. It should be in the winner's bracket longer. If you're talking about a meta tournament, if you're talking about two guys starting the game, the Retribution player is going to lose the first 6 and then quit. But
which faction do you think is more forgiving then?
Which is one's more forgiving? I think Scorn is more forgiving, but if you want to talk about like in the hands, because I thought this was about like strongest.
I do agree, but right now we've got Spence and Jeremy on the fence that Scorn is better, and you and me on the fence that Red is better. So I'd say whichever of them is less likely to make a mistake would probably get the tiebreaker. So that's kind of where I'm sitting right now.
Less likely to make a mistake.
And I do tend to lean a little bit more towards the Scorn tiebreaker because they just got better, as where Rhett has had pretty much no change recently.
Scorn has no high points.
I'll actually give it... Here's the reason why I'll actually give it to...
High points. Scorn has no high points, but then again, Scorn's low points aren't really that prevalent. Rhett has very little across the board.
I could give it to Scorn over Rhett. I could, because Scorn has multiple models that you must deal with. You must deal with Moloch Karn. You must deal with Bronzeback. You must deal with regular Titan Gladiator. You must deal with every model in a Zal list. Retribution doesn't have one of those. Imperatus might not do anything. Their Colossal might not do anything.
Imperatus comes in. I'll tell you, I was really heavy into Scorn when Imperatus came out. Like, whenever that model hit the fucking table, people were really like, oh, this is going to be so cool. And looking at the stats, yeah, I guess he's okay, but it's like, I have a Bronzeback. What the fuck is... Fuck Imperatus. Like, put him on... I want you to put that beautiful model on the table. Set that beautiful, prideful piece of shit on the fucking table. Yeah. I'll bring a rec marker for you, okay?
Okay.
You have to kill it twice.
I'm okay. Good.
You
I
get
get
to.
I'll let you bring two of the motherfuckers. Okay.
I think for that reason and that reason alone, because Scorn has enough of that stuff to be like enough of like big high threats that you have to be really nervous about. Retribution has like the Mage Hunter Assassin, kind of, unless he misses his Mat 7 and just ruins everything.
Or just
like,
doesn't roll exceptional on damage.
like you just like there's a couple, low armor stealth models in that faction that you really have to be scared of, but otherwise you're fine. Also, here's actually another probably more important aside, Retribution, half of their shit that's really cool and special does jack fuck nothing against hordes.
Yeah. Okay. So I've marked them in at 11. I've pushed minions down to 12.
Okay, now let's go ahead and see. Can we get minions to beat Retribution?
That's not a good matchup for Retribution.
That's so bad. That's
All right,
so bad.
moving on.
Barnabas.
The last faction, Convergence.
What number's floating?
1.
1. We would have pushed stuff up.
Shit. Okay, Convergence. They have a solid game against a lot of things, though.
Okay, so obviously list they play, there is the Lucant, which is a brick list with some armor cracking, a little bit of recursion. Axis, which is probably one of the strongest recursion lists in the game. But the problem is it is a very, very heavy skew. It does exactly one thing, and if you can beat it, you win. Mother brings double Colossal on most of her lists and lots of infantry that shoots, but is easy to kill. And then Syntherian brings a Jack Spam, which is mostly gunline, but also has synergy to back it up.
I think it's really interesting that COC as a faction, I don't know what DC was thinking when he was behind the wheel of this. I can't get in his head, but I imagine it was something like, I want this faction to be a Warjack central faction because we don't have any Warmachine factions except for maybe Menoth that plays Warjacks. So I'm going to build a Warmachine faction that automatically beats Warmachine factions.
I don't feel like it automatically beats Warmachine factions. I feel like it beats Signar. Like, Signar does not want to play against Convergence, I'm pretty sure.
But I think Signar, Khador, Krix, and the only one that actually does probably really well against COC is actually Menoth.
Menoth is the only one that's actually probably has the option of being favored.
Yeah.
The other three are not looking good.
No, that's the reason why. I'm not saying that he said let me beat all of Warmachine.
Right.
I think what he said was he's going to give the faction with as shallow as a pool as they actually have all the tools they need to beat so much of Warmachine. That being said, they do not have a ton of tools for hordes unless hordes builds a Warmachine-like army. Like, that's one of the things that I've noticed about COC. If you're in a Warmachine meta, their COC is going to do really well. If you're in a hordes meta, COC is going to just do automatically less well. And not for the same reason that Retribution, because Retribution literally says on some of their cards, like, only works on things with focus.
I think it's actually because Mother is one of their two strongest casters, and she is so heavily leaned to beating Warmachine.
Right. I think they all actually kind of lean towards Warmachine. I just think their entire model range seems to do really well against Warmachine, and which is great. Like, I think it's awesome. Like, I think it's an awesome idea. Like, in terms of game design, when they designed the whole thing, the whole package together, they went, depending upon how you build, you could do really, really well against the meta of our game. Like, I thought it showed good foresight. It allows, with a very shallow model pool to feel like you're doing well. And then it allows you also to have, kind of another side of the coin, whereas they're not doing things against hordes necessarily. They could play against them like anybody could, but they're not doing well against them automatically. So the problem with that is, how do you slide that into like a number right now? Because we've got kind of Warmachine and hordes kind of spread out a little bit. So do you put right above the Warmachine factions because they're better than
I think
Warmachine
you have to consider against the whole entirety of the meta. So let's just start from the bottom and work our way up then, and then we can just talk about each one. So as a potentially thinking about you could be playing any faction, and they tell you you're playing Convergence. How worried are you? Ignoring your specific faction matchups. Like, when someone tells you, is like, all right, you're in the finals and you got paired against the Convergence player, how excited would you be, assuming you're, like, basically ignoring which faction you are playing?
I'm
When
not
you're like,
excited.
well, you immediately go, oh shit, a Convergence player. Or like, you're like, oh, it's just a Convergence player.
I immediately go, oh shit, because Convergence, it takes a high level of skill to play. It's a they did a good job of making it a clockwork faction. So the people who do play that, the ones I've met, are all practiced and skilled at it. It's not a plug and play faction. So they're automatically doing well just from player standpoint. In terms of the actual list, I know that the list is going to do really solid stuff. Like, it's really hard to make a really bad list in that faction.
It's hard to do well with a bad list, I think. Convergence players, I feel like, get weeded out pretty easily.
Right. They try to do something that the faction doesn't do. Like, when you try to play all angels with what's her nuts, like, you're not going to do well.
You're like, and you lose most of your games. Congrats.
Yeah. Congratulations, you picked a bad unit with a below average caster, and you lost all the time. Yeah, grand. If you're playing Lucant for Watcher, if you're playing Syntherian for combined arms jacks, if you're playing carrier group with Mother, or even maybe not carrier group, but a lot of you're taking advantage of ranged jacks and that kind of stuff.
Let's plug and play. Where do they go?
Okay. Let's just start at the bottom. We'll go up. Better than Minions? Everyone agree?
Yep, maybe.
Yep.
Better than Retribution?
Maybe.
Yes.
Better than Scorn?
Yes.
I would say yes. Jeremy's nodding.
Yeah.
Spence is abstaining. Moving on, number 9, Khador. I think they are noticeably better than Khador.
I think it's better than Khador because, like you said, we can drop them against half the game and proceed to do well. So
better than Mercs.
Mercs is number 8. I agree they're better than Mercs. I think this is where we start getting into discussions, though. Moving up to Signar.
I don't see why these guys would care about Signar at all.
Well, not specifically the Signar faction, but is Signar stronger against the meta than Convergence is against the meta?
Signar does kind of blanket well against everything except deep health and high armor.
Well, luckily, Cock can do both.
But we're not looking at them paired against each other.
I know what I'm saying. It's like, well, this handles its problems, and what are its problems? It's like
Convergence's problems are kind of the same. It's weird. They feel like a Menoth faction to me when I play them. They struggle against the same things that Menoth struggles against.
Then I would say, actually, I would put them right underneath Signar, maybe, for no other reason than that you do not have fantastic meta choices, like the wide variety of mercenaries, and just the fact that it's been around longer and you have more model depth. The only thing that competes with that in my mind, maybe they jump over Signar, is that they actually have about the same number of tournament viable casters, even though COC has like 5 casters. In terms of like tournament viability, Signar only has like 4 or 5 casters that are actually considered meta-worthy.
Do you think the new errata impacts that particular meta shift at all? Because Signar is on the downflow. Convergence is really good at shaking lots of effects because the way induction works, like literally they just shake down the line for free unless you're needing to load up all your jacks anyway.
Still have to assign it.
Well, right, you allocate, but I mean, if you were planning on running, you can like induct one, or you allocate one, and then he shakes, and then inducts, and you shake, and it inducts, and you shake, and it inducts, and it goes down the line.
And
you still have to shake during control.
Right.
And they also they're models that get stationary or knocked down that aren't their jacks. Also, a lot of their jacks are immune to knockdown, but
there's a decent portion.
Yeah, things that don't shake either stand still really well because they just like shield guard and heavily stand there, and they have recursion to get back up, or they have guns so they shoot too. Like it's, I would say in the tournament meta, Signar. The funny thing is, Signar. I think Haley is still at the top of their pile. Haley just got slightly worse.
Sure,
but she's still the top, and I think actually Haley 3 is now one of the 4 or 5. I think they only had like 3 before. Now they have 4 at least.
So it's better or worse than Signar?
I actually think they're better than Signar.
Jeremy?
I'm going to put them actually, a caveat there is why they're better than Signar is the fact that I think people have less experience against them. And the fact is, it's true. And the fact is...
That is a true statement, but in the situation that we're trying to rate them in, I don't think that matters. Because it's the strength of the faction in the meta, and I think you have to assume everyone playing is of equal skill.
I would say they're slightly better just because they don't rely on mercs.
So they have like no character restriction problems?
Yeah.
I feel like they're better than Signar, but I have not played Signar.
this will be my tiebreaker, and
Okay.
the reason why I think they might be better than Signar. If they have a similar pool and they deal poorly with similar things, and they have similarly costed jacks with similar power and ability, this thing that Signar actually doesn't have is Signar. The other thing Signar can lose to is assassination, because if you're playing your Signar caster like they're supposed to, they're probably empty. Unless you're playing 3 extra points in your list to put Arcane Shield on them the whole time, and then they might die anyway. COC casters, all of them are so fucking hardy, because they have the ability to camp focus really easily, still do all their effects, and they're all deep health, high armor, and they're all fucking repairable. And they all have repairs, dudes, in their list. So
I mean, that's list options, sir.
Okay, so
I'm not mad. Like I'm not.
Right.
they're
I'm not
above
salty.
Signar.
I think that for the reason that their casters actually live longer, that you take away the meta choice for your opponent to just assassinate you, because COCs, I mean, they're fucking hard to assassinate. They're just so
Sure.
hard to assassinate. I think
they've hit their ceiling.
I think they go up Signar.
So if they go above Signar, that puts them just behind Menoth.
I think Menoth beats them in the current meta right now.
I would agree with that.
Just
In
because they
a
have.
standard steamroller scenario, I think that Menoth is ahead of Convergence.
Also, strangely enough, they're designed to be the Warjack faction, and I think Menoth, like if you actually ran 4 heavies in Menoth versus 4 heavies in COC, I think Menoth might win if they had Choir. They might just win, maybe. I have to think about which caster they'd run, but
All right. So in conclusion,
All right.
how are they stacked up?
I'm doing that now if you guys want to talk amongst yourselves.
Do we need a
Can you
commercial
give us a
break?
topic?
Sure. Things.
We need a commercial break.
The Holy
Yeah,
Roman
let's-
Empire,
Let's do a commercial
Either
break.
holy-
Spence.
Roman, or an empire.
Sometimes Parker doesn't want to win, so he takes Vlad and he puts him away. Then he pulls out another caster. He's a fan of Sturgis. Not Sturgis 2, mind you. The good Sturgis. The bad Sturgis that contends with Haley for a spot on the table. This makes Parker a sad panda. Do you ever decide you really want to go ahead and get that drift exactly where it needs to be? Have Spence roll that shit. It goes exactly where it needs to be. Every fucking time. No questions asked. I'm gonna put a scope on my goddamn Vanquisher's fucking flame belcher.
Fucking should, you cheater.
It's so
Loaded
fucking
dice
good.
using motherfucker.
That's the only, like, when I played Parker and he was playing fucking Sturgis, I was like, Vanquisher, okay, 6-1. Ha! Oh, look at that. I guess I get to boost that blast damage on Sturgis.
And he's on fire. And boxcars.
Enjoy that.
maybe I should just see if somebody wanted to trade a troll army for a Signar army straight up.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Just
Maybe a year ago.
you're right.
Okay, so I've
Missed
got
the
the
chance.
list here. Is everybody ready? Number 1 is Trolls. Surprise. Number 2 is Legion. Number 3, Crix. Number 4, Circle. Number 5, Menoth. Number 6, Convergence. Number 7, Signar. Number 8, Mercenaries. Number 9, Khador. Number 10, Scorn. Number 11, Retribution. Number 12, Minions.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and put a disclaimer here so everybody listening is fully aware of this. At no point are we saying that any of these factions are better than other factions.
Other than Red,
We're talking about factions.
which is worse than the other.
We're talking about
Oh, that's right,
factions.
factions. Only factions.
Not
Sorry.
sub-factions.
Sub-factions don't count.
Okay. Like, I mean, honestly, because at that point we're going to get to Cephalix, potentially Skaven if they ever involve them in this game.
I think Skaven's stronger than Red.
I think they probably are.
I mean, they have the lightning cannon. That's
What's the
pretty good.
hypothetical faction? What are those? I remember there's like some race of like gnomes in Dragonlance,
That's probably true.
and they count continuously. They're like 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 2, and like that's how they count things.
oh, okay.
They are definitely more powerful than them.
Then Rich.
I would actually say one of the only things interesting about our list is I feel like 1, 2, and 3, like the margin that separates them is just incredibly small, and sometimes
Except for 1. Like,
Not-
1 is like 20% better than 2, but 2 and 3 are really close.
you think Trolls is that far ahead?
Yes,
I actually do.
Why are they winning?
because no one's playing them except for Jay, who
Nope.
happens to win remarkably a lot.
Jay wins a lot with Trolls. And he's only played Trolls for... Like, the number of games he's played Trolls is ridiculous for how many games you should have to play to win qualifiers with Trolls.
Jay breaks that thing that I was talking about where troll players are like, derp, I guess I'm going to go ahead
Okay,
and win.
how about this?
He's just such a nice
How
guy,
many
like,
games
so
do you
nice.
think Jay has played with Signar? 500? 600? At least?
Billion and a half.
How many games do you think he's played with Trolls?
7.
It's way more than 7.
I'm gonna ask.
It's probably somewhere around 50, I would guess, versus
more than
probably 500 to 1,000 with Signar. Just saying. I don't know that trolls are legitimately that far out in front, but I think trolls are incredibly good.
Well, just think about how the whole warder thing has shaped so much of the game currently. Because yes, we talk about how people are building against Bradigus. We talk about how people are building against this, building against that. But really, when it comes down to it, warders started pushing how you had to start playing the game.
The funny thing is, now that you say that, I don't think of the 4 lists I would play in trolls, none of them have warders.
How weird is that?
I don't think you need warders to be good with trolls.
Need.
That's true. They are really good.
And that's the reason why trolls are so ridiculous right now. Is you can do whatever you want.
You literally just take shit in trolls. Which is kind of like why I think the only reason Circle gets up to that level is because they do a similar thing. I think trolls just do it to an extreme. Trolls are just like, just take whatever you want. Just build to a theme and play it, and you'll probably win games. As where Circle is like, I'm going to build this list, and that list will give me the same ability of you just throwing shit together.
I like how high we put Menoth, but I think we're also considering.
Well, to be fair, of the 3 people at this table, we all play Menoth, and we have one person Skyping that plays Dirty Signar. So I mean, that might have skewed our preference.
I understand it's skewed, but I mean, quite frankly, I like the fact that we're giving them the respect that I feel like they deserve. I love them as a faction. I think they're great. I think they do incredible things. We were talking about the fluff earlier. It's like I liked the game that cannot be named. 40K, made by Games Workshop.
The one that can't be named.
Yeah. Now I like Space Marines. I like the fucking crazy zealotous fucking knights. I love that. And then I came into the game. I'm like, okay, I guess we'll play this. I'm like, oh, knights. Okay, that's kind of cool. I guess we'll play knights. And then I found out they're all like exemplars of crazy zealotous fucking Space Marine knights. I'm like, yes. And I bought 1 million. So it's like that's where I'm at with them.
I think this is one of the things about our list. I'll say about this list we just made. I have a feeling like there could be a lot of hate thrown at this list if we had such thing.
Well, that's because you ranked it all weird.
No, I think it's just because people are going to interpret their own meta and like place their own like ideas behind this. Because I'm sure there's a meta out there that listens to this podcast that just is like, fucking Retribution player here just fucking is so fucking broken. Retribution
wreck shit, destroying the troll players all the time.
I'm just saying, you guys underestimate how bad Scorn is and how good Red is. I'm just saying. Because we should probably switch those two, but everything else is correct.
I would like this. Everybody go around your own fucking meta and just see if you guys can do the same thing, and then give us that info, and we'll start quoting this to the massive list.
Yeah, and Spence will do this.
I'll do it, definitely.
For everybody.
For everyone. We'll
make an Excel sheet and tally it
I know
What the hell is an Excel sheet? Parker, they're going to give me info, and I'm going to write down what I want. Come on, stop.
The first thing that happens is Spencer's going to get the very first email. He's like, hey, somebody responded to my idea. I guess I'm going to watch porn.
That would be exactly what
I would be watching porn.
I wonder if we could get like 100, let's say 100 people from the competitive meta standpoint, and everyone got 3 votes. You got to vote for 3 factions you thought were the best faction, where those would go, and you couldn't vote for the same faction multiple times. I wonder where that would put everybody.
Well,
because there's 4 or 5 that just wouldn't get votes.
I do believe the Retribution goes above Scorn, but we decided that
I think Retribution goes above Khador.
Really?
Yeah, I think Retribution should have been in at, 8 instead of Khador. Sorry, in at 9 instead of Khador being at 9.
How are you so down on that faction, but you do so well with them?
How would you do well with them? Like, against who?
Yeah.
Don't you do well when you play with Khador? I'm assuming since you've bought the entire faction more than once and you love them that you do okay with them.
I've played more games with the list that I play against people than they have played usually.
True enough.
The problem that Khador has is not at a basic level. Their stuff works. It's at a highly competitive level that they struggle.
Yep.
I don't know. They got you into 2 Masters events.
So
I think Doom Reavers got me into 2 Masters events.
Doom Reavers are a thing.
But hey,
which is saying a lot because Doom Reavers are not good.
Didn't Khador win the Warmachine Weekend Invitational last year though?
Yeah, Will Pagani played Butcher 3 and Vlad won into that, but it wasn't last year's, the year before. Last year Menoth won. The year before that, Khador won in a 16-player pool in which he gamed his 2 lists against 14 of the other players. And he said that ahead of time. He literally knew who was in it, and he sat down for 2 months working on a list that would be good against those 12 players.
I think they get enough of a playing.
No, I don't think they're they're basically middle of the pack. I think that's fine. I mean, we've said that we think that everything is playable, so
Not true.
that's true. Retribution's not playable according to you.
Let's go ahead and sign out.
All right, signing out. This has been Brandon.
Jeremy.
And just Spence.
And Parker.
Goodbye.
Thank you all for listening. This is
So long.
brought